Only thing we ask is that you mute your mics. We're gonna kick this off.
Mhm.
We're gonna get through this rather quickly. We're gonna glean quite a bit of information. This is a select master's degree.
She was
Uh,
there.
this degree is pivotal. This degree is pivotal in Royal Arch Masonry, right? You have to be in the cryptic right to understand and really understand what you did as a Royal Arch Mason or what you're doing as Royal Arch Mason. More symbolically, the actual symbolic lives. So let's just kick this off. Let's get started. All right, everybody see the full screen? No blemishes. Let's get into it. All right, good afternoon. For those that don't know me, Companion Randall from James A. McElroy here in San Diego, California. I would say sunny San Diego, but today is gloomy and it has been raining, so it's not very sunny today. But the outlook of this lecture will be sunny. All right. So the candidate, as we think about how we started this degree starts obviously the candidate. The candidate were you. If you can just step back for a minute, those that are in the Royal Select um, councils, step back and remember when you were the candidate in your Select Master's degree. That candidate was then taught that this degree witnesses the reenactment of the depositions, the things that were deposited, the treasures into the Ark of Covenant, which will be recovered which won't be recovered until the building of the second temple. Okay. But this degree really teaches us the attentiveness to duty, to set a watch over one's words and actions, and illustrates the zealous attachment to duty and the principles of masonry will result in the advancement in the ranks as well as in life. So it's not just in masonry, but we got to think about we do this to be better men, right? The moniker of masonry is we take good men and make them better men, but we have to advance our ranks by utilizing the working tools to get better. The Select Master's degree itself is a culmination of what has been styled the ancient craft masonry. We'll get into that in a second. And as we think about how this was related ancient craft masonry to King Solomon's temple. All right, now this degree itself, this continues the story of the preparation of the building of the temple. And this really commenced from the Mark degree, which is what it was originally called, not this degree, but Mark Master's degree, Mark degree. And then this degree, the three Grand Masters, namely Hiram Abiff, Hiram of Tyre, and Grand Master King Solomon. These are all concerned in dealing with the Ark of Covenant and the treasures therein contained. And we knew from the Select Masters historical account that if the children of Israel were disbanded, which they were disbanded into the wilderness, if they were ever to be found and come back, they would have a key to uncover the lost words, the symbols within the Ark of Covenant that they needed to be successful as a people. Now, when I was talking about the Scottish Rite, here it is, right? The Select Master's degree itself is a second degree in the cryptic rite, right? And it is the ninth degree, and we'll get into the meaning of the number 9, what that means biblically. As conferred in the Council of Royal and Select Masters. This degree was originally referred to as the Select Masters of 27 degree and is listed in the original ritual by Stephen Moran. Now I'm gonna stop there. If you're in the Scottish Rite and you don't know who Stephen Moran is, I might ask you to go back to your Scottish Rite house and to your consistory and maybe do a little research because this man brought all of the Scottish Rite, the 25 Scottish Rite degrees over from Scotland in 1762. Along with those degrees, he brought these Royal Select Master's degrees, right? And again, if you tie him to Frederick of Persia, and these are two very prominent people in Scottish Rite Masonry, but he didn't realize that they were prominent in Royal and Select Masters as well, bringing those degrees over from Scotland by way of Jamaica and Dominican Republic. Okay. The historic outlook of this degree is based on a deposition, as we talked about earlier, those important treasures, the Ark of Covenant, the pot of manna, Aaron's rod, the book of law, and tells us of the manufacturing. These were all manufactured in this whole thing was architected or manufactured by Hiram Abiff. The meeting place itself, here's where it gets kind of funny and we need to pay attention. The meeting place itself was a secret vault. It was located in the temple, better known as the Sanctum Sanctorum or the Holy of Holies. Where have we heard that? In the beginning and the opening of our lodges, we talk about the Sanctum Sanctorum and the Holy of Holies. But you ask 99% of the brothers, what is the Sanctum Sanctorum or the Holy of Holies? They have no idea. This is where the Master Mason's degree was conferred in those 9 arches and apartments, which you'll see shortly. This is where the Master Mason's degree was conferred. Both this degree and the Royal Arch degree are connected together. They are conjoined, and you'll see a slide in a few minutes here. You need both degrees in order to gain a full comprehension of the Royal Arch theme. Right? Itself, these degrees were secrets. Even the crafted know that these degrees were being held in King Solomon's temple. And they were only conferred in the Sanctum Sanctorum of the Holy of Holies. In other words, the select masters were workmen of the temple who had been doing secret work without being even recognized as a working group specifically. Now, talk about the number 9, because at the beginning of the Select Masters degree, in the Royal Select Masters anyway, when you open your council, it talks about the numbers 9 and 3. Right, 9 by 3, as we would say. In the Bible specifically, the number 9 is interpreted as a representation of completeness. Now, we just heard that the Master Mason's degree was conferred in the Sanctum Sanctorum of the Holy of Holies. That is the completeness. That's the degree that was conferred. Now, the finality of that number 9 and the judgment, and this is divine wrath in certain instances, but the Hebrew letter Tet, which represents 9, symbolizes goodness, purity, hidden blessings, and, oh, by the way, new beginnings in Jewish traditions. That's kind of funny. It's kind of a juxtaposition of each other, new beginnings and endings, but it is all in one fair swoop. We get made Master Masons, right? That is a completion. But we also begin a new life now as a Master Mason. And those teachings we have to apply to life, as we talk about in the second slide. But you say Jewish tradition, you say, bro, what is that? Jewish? That has nothing to do with Royal Select Masters, but it actually does. Because if you go back to the Mark Master's degree, or originally deemed as the Mark degree, in Matthew, the book of Matthew, chapter 20, it talks about wages, your wages that were earned on the 6th hour of the 6th day of the week, which in Jewish tradition, which the original Jews were fashioned as the original Hebrews. So Jewish tradition, the 6th hour, the 6th day of the week was a high 12 on a Friday, right? So we think about those wages, and now we're able to earn our wages, not just be given our wages. That's important. The deputy master refers to the number 27, right? 9 times 3, or 9 by 3. 9, the completeness, right? The finality, but the rebirth more or less, and then times 3, remember 3, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit of the Holy Trinity. But in this case, are 3 grand masters, because if one was lost, the word wouldn't be given, right? As we allude to the closing of the ceremonies, although the closing itself states just a little different, some authors believe that the 27 members were made up from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. And the 3 workmen who discovered the triangle were hidden by Enoch. Now, going back again, because the Royal Arch or York Rite degrees tied directly into Scottish Rite. And when we say Enoch, it should automatically cue you to the 13th degree, which is the Royal Arch of Enoch. Now, Enoch, before the flood and the 9 grand masters of the arch, he found or excavated 9 arches and apartments vertically. And he found the word in 1 Samuel in 2024, actually in Exodus. He found the word, not in Exodus, in Book of Samuel, he found the word in those 9 arches and apartments on a gold triangle, right? And again, this is all played out and scripted and biblically in 1 Samuel 20 and 24. And then 1 Kings 5 and 14 as well. Okay. Now, just a little bit about the meaning of the number 27, because we did the 9 times 3, and we talked about 9 and 3, but 27, 7 and 20 use number 27. That number 27 is actually recorded 5 times in the King James Bible itself. It is recorded in most of the book of Esther, recorded about 3 times, actually, to be quite honest, followed by once in the book of Genesis and in First Kings. The number 27 is a derivative and it derives from the part of the meaning, that being the cube of 3, 9 by 3. But we talk about Sarah and Abraham's. Sarah, who was Abraham's wife, means her name means princess or princess of multitude. And this woman lived to be 127. That broken down is 100 plus 27, and that can be scripted out in Genesis 23 and 21. As we think about Abraham himself, he mourned his wife so much that he bought a cave in Hebron, which to bury her, so she can be buried in solitude and peace, and he can have that solidarity there, and then ultimately he himself would be buried or be laid to rest there in Genesis 25 and 9, as well as Isaac and his wife Rebekah, and Jacob and his wife Leah, in the book of Genesis 49, 29 through 32. Again, the point here is that all of these stories can be scripted and be, quantified biblically. Genesis, First Kings, Isaiah, the book of Samuel's, even going into the book of Chronicles 10, which we're going to get into this new character, the royal select mason, Adoniram, right? Adoniram was known, there were some biblical states that he was Hiram Abiah's stepbrother. There's no real facts. There's some breadcrumbs that suggest that, but we know for certain that Adoniram was a tax collector for King Solomon, or King David, Solomon's father. But Adoniram, his life was short-lived. Even being a chief fellow craft, his life was short-lived. He only lived to the age of 47. And his death and his accomplishments, more or less, was chronicled in First Chronicles 10 and 18. Now, Ashahar, this peculiar character, as we talked about the candidate in the first slide, the candidate that you represented Zabud, which we'll talk about here in the next couple of slides. So Zabud was King Solomon's most revered friend. Zabud had repeatedly been told, wait with patience, friend Zabud, for the doors will be open for your reception. This being to that Sanctum Sanctorum, or the Holy of Holies, where the Master Mason's degree was conferred. Now, one night, Zabud wandered into there, and there was no grand steward. That being Ashahar. Ashahar was there. He was asleep though. So the door was open for Zabud's reception. We'll get into that in a second. But Ashahar himself was one character mentioned. This one character mentioned in the Select Master's degree, we sometimes called Ahishar. Is referred to in the book of Kings, 1 Kings chapter 6, where he is said to be over the household. Remember, he was a grand steward, so over the household of King Solomon's temple. He guarded that Sanctum Sanctorum of the Holy of Holies. He's the first one there, right? He made everything happen, but he fell asleep on his duties. As such, he had authority over all of King Solomon's household, his servants, his management. He was the man, so to speak. But what does Ashahar's name mean? Because it's important that the etymology of getting to the root of how we do and what we understand about all this crap, right? Meaning, his name meaning dark brother, right? Brother of darkness. Companions, we should be ever watchful and guarded of the West Gate. We have to watch our West Gate as men and as Masons, right? For the Lord watches over Israel, neither slumbers nor sleeps, considered simply as a historical question. There can be no doubt of the existence and imminence of the vaults between the superstructure of the 31 of the original King Solomon and King Solomon's original temple. Now, for historical context, King Solomon's temple was laid where? This is just a question you don't have to answer, but it was actually made on the hill of Mount Moriah, which is the northeast corner. And as we think about masonry, as we go right back to the end of the apprentice degree, as the end of the apprentice, where will we set? In the northeast corner, right? That was that first stone. So the hill of Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, which is the northeast corner, we know from the 13th degree in the Scottish Rite, Enoch found the actual word in a baluster on a gold plate right there at the hill of Mount Moriah. But that Sanctum Sanctorum and that Holy of Holies after King Solomon's temple was built was horizontal 9 arches. So the horizontal arches, 9 were excavated, and then the vertical arches, and they intersected to form a cross. So this was all biblically, the point is, this was all biblically divine and scripted. This was no accident, right? Now, Grand Zabud. Who was Zabud? We talked about him being King Solomon's BFF. That was, for better or lack of terms, that was his homeboy, right? And King Solomon revered Zabud. He trusted him. He was his most revered friend. Additionally, when you were the candidate in this degree, you represented Zabud, and you wandered into those arches and apartments into King Solomon's most retired apartment, and you were seized, and you were told you were an intruder. And then you remember the rest of that story if you're not in those degrees. I won't go into it too in depth. But this degree opens and introduces our buddy Zabud. Zabud is mentioned in the Bible in 1 Kings 4 and 5. Zabud again was King Solomon's BFF, better or lack of terms, and his most trusted friend. And he was said to be the son of the prophet Nathan. Now Nathan was the chief advisor and minister to King Solomon. The biblical narrative states that though the strategy of David, Nathan, and Bathsheba and King Solomon came to the throne of Israel. Now, being detected as an intruder, as we discussed, Zabud was almost killed. Hiram Abish stepped in, said, no, mercy should be tempered with, justice should be tempered with mercy. King Solomon agreed. They had a trial. Zabud ultimately was found not guilty. Ashahar, as we spoke of before, was put to death for being diligent or negligent in his duties. Ultimately, Zabud was promoted to be the grand steward. Now, the historical perspective of all of this stuff, how does it play into history, right? History is his story, and we have to know where we came from in order to know where we're going. So the select master's degree, the building of the secret vault, took place between about the first and the second section of the Royal Master's degree, all right, which you'll see the chronological order here shortly. This is explained by saying the secrets of the select master's degree were not brought to light until the long existence of the Royal Select Master's degree had been known and acknowledged. As we think about the chronological order of masonry, it doesn't go in and I've said this many times, it does not go in a 1, 2, 3 manner. Senator Prentice, Fellowcraft, Mark Master's degree. Because in the Mark Master's degree and the Select Master's degree, what were you dressed as? Fellowcrafts. Now think about how this timeline falls. And we talk about a fall between the first and second sections. Where the Master Mason's degree is, the Select Master's degree is where the Master Mason's degree was conferred. Your education as a Royal Master continued, and then you went on to the second section of the Royal Master's degree. Because remember, the Royal Master's degree is broken down into a couple of different sections. So ultimately, what I'm saying is this is the chronological order of masonry and how it falls and how you can track it biblically, because it doesn't go in a basically Genesis to Revelation type of order, so to speak. Now, what was in that Sanctum Sanctorum of the Holy of Holies? It was a substitute ark in the second temple. In the first temple, right? This is where the Ark of Covenant. This is what everybody was after. This is why it was so secret. This is why it was so select, right? So, select masters. Select being a very few, a very small, specific group, right? But Masonic legend informs us, whether authentic or not, it really teaches us that an ark in the second temple was neither the Ark of Covenant, which had been in Holy of Holies or the Sanctum Sanctorum of the first temple, nor that it had been constructed as a substitute for after the building of the second temple. Now, start a discussion. I told you I was going to be quick, but it should have been impactful enough so where we can have a decent discussion. So what questions do you brothers have, or comments or concerns? Because this select, again, the chronological order of masonry should let you know that there was something you're missing. there's something in masonry I'm missing, because brothers get told, I should go in this house. I should go in that house. Well, we saw that Stephen Moran brought those degrees over here in 1762. The same time he brought the Scottish Rite degrees. And oh, by the way, Frederick of Persia added, what, 8 more degrees to make it 33? But the Scottish Rite degrees are only 25 degrees originally. So there was a lot going on in the 1700s. And then before, that was the 16th century. There was a lot going on there. All right. So what questions do you brothers have? Our comments. This is what we just started discussing. This is, I told you, this is my favorite part of what we do here. Oh yeah, it's oh no raise your hand, man. Just come off the mic. We done. Yeah, we open Kimbono now.
I see Brother Garrett saying something. Just hit mute either. There you go.
There you go, Brother Garrett.
Okay. I had a question because repeatedly it's been said that there are 3 levels of fellowcraft. And at first I tried to link it up with the chronological chart, trying to figure out, you know, you start off as an entered apprentice, then you get the fellowcraft degree. Then there's the mark master, which is sort of part of that fellowcraft, but I was trying to figure out with the 3 levels. Is that broken up in terms of the degrees, or does that go into the ancient, starting off with Tubal Cain? Or
that's exactly where that starts. Go back across the Sea of Joppa, right? Tubal Cain was an artificer of metals and wood. How did those woods and timbers get hewn without the sound of an axe or any tool? That was the first level of fellowcraft.
Okay.
Tubal Cain, right? And I don't think in the big scheme of masonry, we don't think about Tubal Cain. We don't give him credit for being a fellowcraft, but he was. Adoniram represented that second level of fellowcrafts.
Okay.
Right. Our third level, actually, Hiram Abiff being that second tier, and then Adoniram being the chief fellowcraft. So we break it down based on those time frames, not so much on the chronological order. The chronological order really is just to say, because I say it like this: masonry is a beautiful story told backwards. It's not told, from left to right, right? It's actually almost Hebrewish, and it really is Hebrewish because Hebrew is read from right to left. So it gives it a different spin, and then when you translate it into Greek and English, then that literal interpretation changes.
Okay.
Hence, cryptic masonry. Good question, though.
So
Sir,
I have a question.
if I could just add to that,
Please.
and it's not so much levels of fellowcraft than it is classes, because you had those fellowcraft who were, skilled in wood, those who were skilled in stone, and those who were skilled in metals, so you had different classes of fellowcraft versus different levels, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense, because remember, on the 6th hour, the 6th day of the week, in the Mark Master's degree, right, which is Matthew 20, you were paid your wages. But when you were a fellowcraft coming through your symbolic lives, you were given your wages. So think about that, right? The classes are true. That's absolutely an accurate statement.
So
you advance in life, right? And you start off, let's take it just basic work, right? Whatever your job title is or description is, whatever you do for work, you didn't start off at the high end of the pay scale. You start at the lower end of the pay scale, and then you ascended up, right? Go ahead, Keith. I think you want to say something.
No, sir, I'm good.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
state that.
So what I was going to say was going back to the timeline where I think you pointed out the Royal Masters was a part of that interim between fellowcraft and master mason.
Absolutely.
Did that also include that past master degree as well, so that you can get that to become an actual master, or is that taking place after that royal degree?
That is after, and here's the thing. Remember, the past master's degree was only made up symbolically just to give you some credence, to say it was actually more of an honorary thing. It had nothing to do with your ascent. Your ascent based on if you look at your second landmark, your ascent was to be a Royal Archmason in order to be considered a Master Mason. But in order to be a full-fledged Royal Archmason, if you look at the chronological order, you had to be a Royal and Select Master, a Select Master, and a Royal and Select Master, a Royal Master, excuse me.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense and it answers my question because that's where I was drawing the significance to was in order to become a Royal Archmason, you had to go through some other things to get to it. And I was trying to figure out if that past master degree was part of that or that was just part of the honorary degree so that the brothers could get that that feeling of completion of being a Mason. Which is
It's
part of-
true. That is true. That is true. And excuse me for cutting you off, but somebody just, I think it was Burley, just put in there, it's our second landmark, right? We have these 25 ancient landmarks that we forget to look at. I know that they've been violated over and over and over again, but we have to go back. I said it earlier in the presentation. You have to know history is his story. You have to know where you came from in order to know where you're going. But the 25 ancient landmarks tell a story that we just overlook. And that second landmark is so pivotal and powerful, it continues to be violated. And since the Act of the Union in 1860, it has been violated repeatedly. Now, certain countries still adhere to it, not in America. In the United States, we don't adhere to it. So I would encourage everybody to look at the 25 ancient landmarks at some point over the next couple of weeks and just familiarize yourself when brothers are asking these questions, then you at least have a historical account of what you should be doing and where we came from. And then you can kind of guide these brothers to know where they need to go and where you need to go.
You should also know which one of your jurisdictions, which ones they follow and which ones they don't, because all jurisdictions don't follow them all.
Man,
Um,
hey, Steve, I missed you, man. Where you been?
School been wearing your boy out.
Okay.
But when we talk about the landmarks and the significance,
Mhm,
and somebody also, whoever just asked about the past master's degree, the
mhm,
one you receive in a Royal Arch is considered a virtual degree.
right.
There's a reason that we use the term virtual for that particular degree, and it's because it gives a level of credence to those who have served but not yet have served in the seat.
Facts.
I give an example, and I think I've given this example before. There was a lodge here in my jurisdiction that had the same worshipful master for 62 years.
Whoa.
There's no way that anybody was going to be of any service to the craft without receiving that degree. And so
Mhm.
some brothers, that's how they became past masters, is because they needed that. They needed some level of, for people who had those kind of situations. Now we ain't had that situation since, but yeah, 62 years as master of a lodge is insane to anybody, especially to me. Cause I've been in 3-4 years and I'm like, oh, y'all can have this.
Yeah.
But when you talk about the significance of the history, you have to know what time frame we're looking at, what was taking place in the culture at that time, and that makes it make a lot more sense for those of us who are studying what's going on and what's taking place.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm glad you're on here, Steve. The chronological order is actually a little bit more in depth than what I showed you. And Steve can allude to it, and I think I've summed this out before. I'll dig it up and send it back out again. Steve had provided the chronological order, but it includes the Scottish Rite degrees. It doesn't just include the symbolic lodge and the York Rite. It includes the Scottish Rite, and rightfully so, because the Lodge of Perfection and all of the Scottish Rite goes all in York Rite is all intertwined. It is crazy if you look at that whole chronological order. I only gave you just a small snippet based on this lecture today. Trust me. Good thoughts,
To
man.
you again. But yeah, I do have, and that's one of the things that kind of gives a level of insight to how masonry works, because you'll start looking and seeing that things in the Scottish Rite were taking place around the 3rd and the 4th degrees, or the 5th and the 8th degrees. And when you start looking at it from that standpoint, it helps you tell the story of masonry and it gives you a better understanding. Because if we looking at masonry the way we look at it through the ritual, we'd all be confused. So and if it makes sense to you, I want to know how it makes sense. So there is a chronological order to all of the degrees, and it includes the Scottish Rite, which somewhat validates our experiences as York Rite Masons. Because, we've had the division, if it ain't York, it ain't right, or, this is better than this. But in essence, you need the compilation of everything to have a good understanding to really
Yeah.
be full circle.
It's true, because you think about it, we call Scottish Rite, and I'll let you go after this, Brother Cantor, I see your hand up. But we call Scottish Rite the College of Masonry. Now, if we think about the College of Masonry, how can you get a college degree without the prerequisites? So I'll just let that hang there and let that sit on your brain for a second. Go ahead, Brother Cantor.
Good afternoon, brothers. It is a pleasure to be here with you all. But Dr. Randall, can you go back and repeat the number 27? I was caught off guard by that, and it seemed really, really interesting to me because you also mentioned the name of Enoch, who hid the triangles before the flood. So if you could just browse over that real quick.
Let me pull it back up.
So in the meantime, number 27 also adds up to the number 9, which includes the understanding of completion,
Right, yeah.
which
So-
adds to the
Go ahead, B. Go ahead.
which adds to the mathematics and the numerology that we teach in the second degree. So it all ties in.
Absolutely, right. It never stops, right? It's just a vicious, repetitive cycle. But we think about, and what Brother Cantras is asking, the meaning of the number 27, as we kind of break this down, 7 and 20, use the number 27, recorded again 5 times in the King James Bible, 3 times in Esther. This can be chronologically broken down into Genesis. You can read about this in Genesis and First King. But the number 27 derives, part of the meaning is from the cube of 3. And then we get into Sarah, Abraham, and the princess and the multitudes. And then Sarah's age of 127 broken down to 127. And so we can break that down even further, like Burley was saying, to the number 9 as the completeness, but also kind of the revitalization of the newness of the square root of the cube of 3. And then we can break 3 all the way down to our 3 grand masters, but biblically the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, which is historically known as the Holy Trinity. Okay, and a lot of this can be broken down specifically dealing with the Adoniram and some other things as we talk about the number 27 in 1 Samuel 20 and 24. I hope that answers your question, Brother Cantor.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
So again, it's we think about these type of lectures and we think about this type of information sharing where we kind of break some things down even further, because it's imperative to kind of have a basic understanding. And I say that because I tell younger brothers, when they get raised, I think this is a generation where we put a bunch of emblems on our cars and we wear a bunch of emblems, but it is rather embarrassing when someone asks you what those emblems mean and you can't tell them. It is not only embarrassing to you per se, but it's embarrassing to the fraternity. And so our membership suffers because we are uninformed, right? And as we do these, this is where I told you, this is my favorite part of it, because we start the knowledge share. I love having Steve on here. We go back and forth, and he's a wealth of knowledge, and there's quite a few brothers on here. Most Section Grand High Priest Traham. I see Dale on here. Weaver. It's a wealth of knowledge on this call. Burley, so on and so forth, that we can just swap ideas and understanding so that we're well informed brothers. Pharaoh's on here, who's very versed in esoteric masonry, who gives us a different look. So it's Burley. So great questions, brothers. What else do y'all have? We got like an hour, brothers. I kind of want to give us a little bit of time before 3 o'clock so I can get on the Scottish Rite call, ironically. But
I got a quick question.
yes, sir.
when you talk about chronological,
Mhm.
you're talking, as far as, the timeline or the order the books are in the Bible?
Not the order of the books in the Bible excluded. The Bible helps us tell the story or define the story of masonry for the most part, with the exception of the third degree. We're just talking about the degrees themselves. So we're talking about interdependence degree, fellowcraft degree, royal select masters, mark master's degree, so on and so forth.
Okay,
Yeah, so that's specifically when we talk about the chronological order. We talk more specifically about the degrees in masonry, not so much about the biblical chronological, because chronologically the Bible is Genesis to Revelations, the King James Bible, and then you can get into a whole nother conversation about the Torah and Apocrypha. Kind of gets weird and gets into a rabbit hole that we're not gonna go in on this call. I'm not doing that. No, sir. Nope, not gonna do it. Not the kid.
I have a question, if
Yes,
I
sir.
may. Yeah, I
please.
want to ask a question about interesting concept. We was talking about Ashahar,
Mhm.
dark brother,
Dark brother,
meaning
yeah.
of darkness. Can we go into what type of darkness are we referring to? Like bad behavior, sinfulness, or
No, not
color,
dark. Not
or-
dark is in metaphorically dark or sinful or anything like that. Dark less than skin. So what I failed to mention, and I truly apologize, and great question. Purple, right? The royals, like you see, quite a few of these brothers on here in purple. Purple people were from the city of Gabal. They were Phoenicians. Phoenicians were dark. Their skin was dark. They were us, right? That's when I talked about Jewish. Those were the original Hebrews, dark. So dark brother meaning dark skinned. The melanin. He wasn't today's version of Jesus. How about that?
outstanding?
Does that help?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So Gabal, right? A city of, Gabal, a city of Phoenicia. And then Phoenicians being purple people or people of purple, purple being the color of royalty. And as we think about as past masters, there's quite a few past masters over here, those colors that you wear are very symbolic. And they are emblematical of your royalty and your stature. That's elevated you. You as a district deputy, same thing, right? It elevates your status and think about where that came from. So dark skinned.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Dr.
What else,
Randall,
brothers? Go ahead. What's up, Mo?
how you feeling?
Hey, man, if I had your hand, I'd cut mine off. What's up?
Come on now. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I was hearing the brother talk about Enoch hiding the triangles before the flood.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know 360 degrees is a complete circle.
Yes,
But then
sir.
we got the royal and select degree. We
Mhm.
have triangle, which is 180 degrees,
Mhm.
which goes back to the still a number completion, 1 + 8 = 9. So it's still dealing with that 9.
Right.
But what's the spiritual essence of the 180 degrees being broken in that broken triangle? Why is that triangle broken spiritually speaking?
That triangle book, spiritually speaking, is more of a metaphor, but we can go back. We can say in a royal master's degree, if I die, it'll be buried here. You can't give that word unless all three are present. Now, we look at the Holy Trinity, right? The Holy Trinity would not be a Trinity with one missing. So again, that spiritual triangle, that completeness is broken. There's severed. It's severed from that point. That's why you notice degrees go back and forth. And like in the 6th degree specifically, Hiram Abiff is finally dead. And you're like, what just happened, right? So we're talking about that missing piece. And we talk about triangles and circles. We can kind of get into that a little bit later. Now, I want Steve to kind of jump in on that piece of the conversation. But in the meantime, the equilateral triangle is what? A perfect angle. It's considered a perfect angle, geometrically speaking. And we talk about equilateral triangles, but we talk about the perfection being what? The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We break those, it's broken.
I appreciate that.
Yes,
Thank you.
sir.
So since I was requested,
Yeah, for sure.
so I also just put the chronological order of the degrees in the chat for those of us who might be able to get to it a little faster. It's in the group, it's in the chat. So when you talk about the triangles and circles, it because I just did a lecture for Ohio And I talked about shapes and all of that other kind of stuff of the Royal Arch. When you look at the Triple Tower, when you look at the Triple Tower, essentially, you see triangles, circles, right angles, horizontals, and perpendiculars. Even if you look at the Triple Tower, you have 9 right angles.
Yeah.
So if you want to, and this is just a hypothesis, if you want to ask what's the spiritual connection, you could say that there's a broken relationship between man and God. And that's why the triangle is broken. If you want to go there, I leave that up to those who choose to go that route. But there's always a separation and there's always a certain level of brokenness. Here, they have the argument on which side should the triangle be broken on. Does it really matter which side the triangle should be broken on? Like, just and so when you start looking at circles, of course, the first thing that comes to mind when you're discussing circles is the circle of life. When you start looking at triangles, you start thinking about the divinity. You start thinking about the phrase "as above, so below." When you start looking at Jewish stars, or what some would consider the Solomon seal, it's an equilateral triangle pointing up. It's an equilateral triangle pointing down, and one overlaps the other. That's one thing that we often don't pay attention to, is that there's a way the triangle is supposed to be positioned when you look at Solomon's seal, and often we don't look at it like that. And I want to say it's the triangle above, one side overlaps and the other side goes under, and it's intertwined that way for a specific reason, to show the bridge between the celestial and the terrestrial. So when we start looking at, those things, it's really important to get an understanding of what you're looking at, not just assuming that things are just this way they just put it together this way. There is a reason for it all. So when we had that conversation about the Royal Arch, and one thing I've been reading is Solomon's seal. I don't know what convinced me to get knee deep in that conundrum. But when you start looking, I
Rabbit hole.
literally, I started
It's a
and
rabbit
went,
hole.
yeah,
It's a
I
rabbit
went
hole.
way left, and had to get myself back in line. But those are the things that we start to study because we assume that things look a certain way. But when you study some of the older Royal Arch books, those triangles are intertwined for a reason. They show the connection between as above and so below. It's not just put together haphazardly. There's a reason for why we do the things we do. We see the things that we see. There's a reason why masonry is written the way that it's written, because it is meant to be understood by those who have put forth the effort to understand.
That's correct.
I'll give you even a simpler breakdown of that. Masonry is biblical breadcrumbs. That's what Stephen just told you. Masonry is biblical breadcrumbs. As we think about it, we have to trace it back biblically to understand the real story, right? And so just think about it in terms of, if you wanted to make it very elementary, biblical breadcrumbs. It is written, it is fashioned in a certain way. It is cryptic. It is told backwards, right? But it's done that way because the Bible is that way. Because you can't read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation to get a thorough understanding of the Bible. You just read it from Genesis to Revelations, and you read a bunch of books and a bunch of different characters. So you have to kind of read it. It may go from Genesis to Isaiah, back to Jeremiah, to whatever, right? And it's that way on purpose so that we get a full understanding, but it makes us dive deeper into the study. Right? And Steve was right, that brokenness is the incomplete relationship that we have with the Most High God, because when Jesus died, we got a choice. When Yahweh Shai died, we were given a choice. We chose. Some choose to be spiritual, some choose not to, or chose not to. And that's a choice. And then we were taught in the first and second and third degree that we had to build the spiritual ornamental edifice. We had to work on our own temples. That house not built with hands, made in the heavens, right? We had to work on ourselves. So that journey is your journey to start with, that completeness, or lack thereof. Again, it's a choice. And then you can get into when Jesus died on the 9th hour. At what age? 33. So there's a lot of stuff that you just got to put the breadcrumbs together. Eventually, you're gonna have a full meal, but you got to find all the breadcrumbs, snatch them up. So what else, brother? I talked to a lot of y'all, so I know y'all ain't just quiet.
Venture
This
to
is
say that you do yourself a disservice if you don't gather the breadcrumbs.
Absolutely.
And you know, for those of us who study masonry, you are excited when you find something that you didn't see before.
Dang.
You should be, at least. I don't know. I feel like there's a certain level of anticipation as you dive deeper or endeavor to dive deeper into masonry, because you're gonna find stuff that you didn't have any idea how you got here. One thing that when I wrote a recent lecture for the Royal Arch, and we started talking about dodecahedrons and like icosahedrons and all the rest of this kind of stuff, it all goes back to shapes, signs,
Geometry.
symbols, and all this. Yeah, all this kind of stuff,
It's the most
geometry.
noble science. There it is. Yep.
And so we learn this in the second degree. We don't put it to practice until we get here. And
Mhm.
so we always have to be mindful of the foundation and how significant it is for us to be better masons. Because if you do not learn the first 3 degrees, we just had a group of individuals join my Blue House Lodge. And I told them, I said, you have to learn this because this is what you'll practice to use all the time. This is so significant for you because you'll actually learn and use this. Now, when they got their 3rd degree and they started coming back to meetings, I was like, remember this? And they was like, oh man, I didn't even realize we said this. I didn't even realize we meant this is what this meant. And so we have to always be able to connect what we do now back to the foundation, because the foundation is essentially what you build upon. If you didn't study those first 2 degrees, those first 3 degrees, then when you get here, you're going to be just as confused as you might have been in the first 3 degrees.
Yeah, but
Hopefully
you know
you
what's funny? Yeah, what's funny is people do that and then they jump right into the Scottish Rite and it makes it even worse. And I hate to say that, but that's the truth, right? When you get into the Scottish Rite degrees, now it's so much more confusing, right? Now you start adding a lot more biblical stuff because we talk about Christianity a lot at that point, and then so it starts getting really weird, and brothers don't understand, and then they get discouraged, and then brothers stop coming. Right, and here we are, right, in this form, trying to bring brothers back because they do just what Steve said. They don't study.
Mhm.
They take the first 2, 3 degrees for granted. Yeah, 7 liberal arts of science, Brother Cartwright. That's exactly right. The 7 liberal arts of science is huge in all of masonry, and we just don't study it. We just say, all right, it's cool. It's cute. It looks cool. Right? It's cool to say, it's cool to recite in the 357, but we don't really know what it means.
Well, it's basically the application of what you learned in the first 3 degrees. This is the application of it. This is the alchemy of what we do as Masons. This is how you manifest. If you don't understand those basic principles as we go through the first 3 degrees, how will you ever manifest anything when you get to these degrees and actually create?
There's no way. It's impossible.
Yeah, one of the things relative to the several level arts and sciences that we found in traveling around the world is most persons are actually going through 7 level arts and sciences. When you're doing your 2nd degree, there's no real emphasis on that. And I think as an educator, and I have 2 masters, so I'm an engineer and some other stuff. The issue here is this: it's the several liberal arts and sciences. You have the first segment, it's called the trivium, and the second is the quadrium. And that's like a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. If you can't do the bachelor's, you can't do your master's. And when the Bible is written by those who wrote it, it's based on the same thing that's sitting there in the 2nd degree. And nobody looks at it and nobody talks about it. When you look at the trivium, you're looking at logic, rhetoric, and grammar. The minute you start to think about logic, rhetoric, and grammar, when you speak and you get up, if you can't appreciate that, you go back to primary school when they start to look at problems in maths. and he says Mary has 4 apples, Jane has 3 apples, and all of a sudden everybody gets lost. How many fruits are there? 7, right? Then when we actually master the trivium, which is again rhetoric, logic, and grammar, we now elevate ourselves to the master side of the degrees. We're not in Masonic conversation, but from academia. And we now go into mathematical components where we're looking at astronomy, music, arithmetic. And what's the 4th one? I mean, y'all could help me out here. You got astronomy, arithmetic, music, and geometry.
Geometry.
See, when you start to look at those things and we can look at it in its entirety, we at the level where we're at now, if we're able to go back to our Blue Lodge, I'm 33rd, right? But when we go back to, they send us back to our Blue Lodge for those who don't understand. And we have to be able to understand the same chronological timeline and understand there's a gap there. And why was that gap placed there and set in the manner which was, whether you're right, going from right to left, left to right. The issue here is we need to go back to our Blue Lodges and allow in that 2nd degree. Yeah, I know 3 is equivalent to this, the 5 is equivalent to that, the 7 is the archers and all the rest of this stuff. But nobody, I was in Oklahoma 6 years ago, and the individual brought this up to me, and it stunned me. I sat in my car for an hour. Because as much as I read, and much as I saw, and much as I was lectured, nobody ever talks about the several liberal arts and sciences, and that is how the Bible is written, in my mind.
You're right. You're absolutely correct.
I'm over.
That is damn, that's mind blowing because you're right. We don't, bro. I really appreciate that. Brother Barnes, I know you had your hand up for a while, man. I don't want to.
And that's okay. Good evening. I just wanted to know, just for significance, why did we open up on the 9th degree in the Royal and Select Masters, please?
The Royal and Select Masters?
Yeah.
We can go back to 1762 when they came. That's just the order, right? There's I haven't found anything specifically saying we should open up here versus here.
Right.
But if I had to take it back, I would just go back, like we talked about earlier, to the ancient landmarks. If we really utilize that 2nd landmark, we would be doing things a whole lot differently.
Right.
And the way we would open our lodges would be based on the chronological order I just sent you. And actually, to be honest with you, I'll regress on that statement. It's if you look at what Steve put in the chat, the actual chronological order, you're going to see like the Lodge of Perfection and a whole bunch of other degrees in there that we should be opening up on.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
All good. Brother Osnell, go ahead.
Yes, sir. If I may respectfully offer, 27 being perfection. One of the final lectures we received after we've become a sublime, Masons, is during the lecture, we're told that Hiram Abiev's body was buried 3 times. The 3rd being the Holly of Hollies, which is literally 3 times 9, the 9 arches or whatever, 27. I think in my heart of hearts, I believe one of the better ways to bring people in, to invite them into our blood craft, is to go back in and pinpoint the little things here and there that is within the story, within the allegory of the 3rd degree, and explain it to them in a manner which they want to dig further. That's it, sir.
I would say yes, and then I would respectfully disagree that the 3rd degree can't be traced biblically, which gives it a false, a kind of a false narrative, if you will. Right? There's no biblical account of the 3rd degree. The 1st and 2nd degree and every other degree can be accounted biblically, either in most of the biblical books. But the 3rd degree is a made-up degree. So when we start doing that, it'll confuse some brothers. And I'll be honest with you, because I've had this conversation with brothers. And if they can't trace it biblically, like the 21st landmark, because here we are with those landmarks again, then it's hard to give it real credence. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. But I'm looking more on the several liberal arts and science as in using it.
The several liberal arts and science. Yeah. Brother Cartwright
reason and logic. Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Brother Cartwright hit that on the head, though. We do. There it is. We do have to look at the 7 liberal arts and sciences. Go ahead, Steve.
those of us who have the books that we might not read until we get old, or when we get some free time, there's a book on the Trivium. Here it is. It's on Amazon. I don't remember who wrote it. But if you type in Trivium, you'll find it. There's a book on the Quadrivium, which Brother Cartwright just spoke about. Geometry, music, and cosmology. There's another book for those of us who like to study science that would also be of great knowledge to those of us who like to study. It's called Scientia. SCINCIA. These books, there's another one that I don't remember what the other one is titled, but we have to be able to find masonry outside of masonry. Because then it intrigues you to study more. Once you get to a point in which masonry becomes a part of your everyday occurrences, it becomes more interesting to you because you can find it in everything. It's almost like Christianity and God. When you find God in the small stuff, you start to have a greater appreciation for it. When you find masonry in the small stuff, you start to have a greater appreciation for it. Every time I see a car decal or something like that, it doesn't necessarily excite me, but I'm like, there's somebody who has started the journey to travel and hopefully find themselves a more enlightened man. And so I'm gonna try to find these on Amazon and put them in and link them to the group chat. But that's the key. We have to find these great concepts in very small places. Every time I see a circle, I kind of chuckle to myself. Every time I see a square, like I was in somebody's office one day, and he had a rough ashlar sitting on his desk, and I kind of chuckled to myself because I was like, oh, that's a very interesting thing to own, to kind of keep you ever mindful of what we have been called to do. We have one sitting outside the Grand Lodge. Like we had a big one. It's a big one that sits outside our Grand Lodge. When I went to California a while ago and I visited the Grand Lodge in LA just to see it, I was like, huh. All the times I grew up in this building and I never found them. I never saw this building before. And so those are the things that we find interesting because you can put yourself in a scenario in which masonry is larger and smaller than you because you just find yourself kind of engrossed in it. Every time I see a building with an old symbol, with an old emblem on it, I'm like, I wonder whoever went there. And so I think there's validity in knowing that masonry is not just this big grand concept. It's very simple. We make it complicated. Masonry is a perfect system full of imperfect people.
Right. We muck everything up anyway. Right. Once you put man on it, right, we muck it up anyway. That's why I said we were given the choice. And we chose different things. Again, hence why we're on this call, right? We all come from different states, different jurisdictions, different understanding and trains of thought, but together, collectively, we get a better appreciation and understanding of not only the arts and sciences, but as Brother Carver talked about the trivium and those things of that nature. So, go ahead, brothers. I mean, this is just, you don't have to raise your hand, man. Literally just come off mute.
Yeah, I have something to add. I've just been listening quietly on purpose because I have to sit still when there's some education being handed out, and I'm willing to receive. Right. So, the number 9 is been a thing. I've discovered the number 9 on my own for when I was doing my research with the 9 arches and I remember a past master said me, hey, that's a different house. I was a younger junior Marine, I was a retired Marine, but I was a young Master Mason. As a matter of fact, I was a fellow craft when he told me this, and I was about to get my Master Mason degree. And I asked him, what about the number 9? Because we were going over the 3, 5, 7, 9. And I figured out to myself and said, well, that's a life cycle. So, and I started looking in the Bible and it said completion. So, and we all know that 9 is complete. Even death is a complete. life cycle. But you never really die. Your body dies, right? So you spiritually and you're reborn. You're in your spiritual body, and you go up and you ascend to heaven. So that's how I relate to junior Marines, or sorry, to junior or younger Master Masons who are seeking knowledge, to try to inspire them to seek more knowledge. Because I know now even some seasoned brothers or some past masters don't even recognize the number 9. They just say 357. I said, well, you got to go on to the other side. You got to go on and look and read the Bible and get into the scriptures, and you got to relate this back to masonry, just like the breadcrumbs that you were talking about, Raul, or Dr. Raul. It's important to understand that. And once you get something like that, we call those like nuggets, right? You got to give them up. Don't just hoard them to yourself, but you got to give them up, because this knowledge and understanding, we're supposed to be trying to understand this. We were ordered to do this, not only to love our neighbor, but to seek understanding through the scriptures, right? Because understanding comes wisdom. So, with that being said, man, that's all I really had. I wanted to share that with you because it's inspiring to see this, and that my studies and what I've gathered has not gone to waste, and I'm on the right track. So, and another good thing is that we have these because we all have to kind of like be saying the same thing, so we're not tripping all over ourselves when it comes to a united front. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Now, man, after every degree, what do we get? A charge. And what is a charge, right? It's a directive. It's giving us, it's kind of ordering us or mandating us, and essentially in each charge, it gets more confounding if you think about the charges. It gives us more things to think about, to do, to be cognizant of. But we forget, like we hear all of this stuff, only thing we try to remember is what we just went through in a degree. And for some reason, the last thing we hear, we always forget. And I don't know how that's possible, but we tend to do it all the time. But after every degree in masonry, there's some sort of charge that you're given. We just got to adhere to those and then continue to learn to study as you were saying. So, and brothers, like I said, this always is a good time for me. It's solemn. I really tend to take on a lot and learn a lot. And I appreciate the up to 65 brothers that's been on here today. So we'll spitball for a few more minutes, Brother Cartwright. Hell of an input on the 7 liberal arts and sciences. I think after we finish this lecture series, I think that's something that is forthwith. The 7 liberal arts and sciences. Steve keep thinking he's running from a lecture, but he think he's safe. He gonna come out here dropping bombs. You're gonna be on this lecture series. We're just trying to get through the whole series first. You're gonna be on this train. You don't need a ticket. You don't need a ticket. It's already paid for.
Right. And that's the thing, like you just said, we oftentimes have found ourselves to tell people, oh, you need to learn this, but you don't necessarily need to learn it. You need to understand it. You need to be sure that what we've instructed you to do has called you to a higher place or a higher calling. That's what I always tell. I tell people, hey, I want you to learn the stuff that we're teaching you because you need to know it, but you also need to know why you took this obligation. Because if you don't know why you took the obligation, then you're kind of lost in the salt. You're kind of lost in the fact of, oh, I just got this degree. I know why I did this, but what have you been called to do? People go to church, but you have been called to do something. What people go to churches, they go to mosques, but there's a greater calling for your life. You have to make sure that whatever you're doing, you are fit for that particular stone in that particular edifice. Because if you're not, then everything that you've been working on, what you've been building on, won't fit. You might be too round to fit in this particular spot. You might be too oblong to fit in this particular spot. And so we have to be mindful that we are doing what we are called to do. When you take these obligations in masonry, everybody recites them. Not many people take them, and there's a difference.
Yeah.
You recite your...
I got one thing to add. I've been hearing throughout the series about learning, about understanding, but I'm never hearing about applying. Masonry is an applied science.
Mm-hmm.
lectures I've been hearing, I'm not saying just within this here, but in general, we're all learning, we're all figuring things out, but we're not applying. Let's start applying what we learn in these degrees and actually see and experience how the lessons in masonry that we're learning and understanding actually work. Masonry is an applied science that we're not using. And we need to start using it.
I'll do you one better. We get working tools, we never use them.
Question: can you apply what you don't understand?
But once you understand it, you have to apply it to test the theories. You got to get in there to work it.
Both things can be true. It's a duality. It is a duality there, right? Both things can be true and they are true, right? You have to understand it. But again, I ask brothers, you can't understand if you don't have a solid why. What's your why?
That might be the broken piece, the application.
We can spitball all day and go back and forth about what we need to do, but just like I tell brothers that work for me, you know, men and women that work for me and so on and so forth, give me a quarter cup of gas. Give me a little give a shit. That's all you need, just a quarter cup. Figure out your why. If you don't know your why, how can you understand? And then how can you apply? You can't do either or if you don't care.
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? Right? Am I here just to be the most illustrious Grand Thoughts illustrious master? Steve, you and I talked about this before. Am I here just to be a grand lecturer? Am I here? Why am I here? Why?
Jesus gave one order, 2 words. It said, follow me. Follow my consciousness, not follow my deeds, follow my actions. Are we not all working to be like Jesus, like Christ-like consciousness?
In Psalms 1, it says to meditate on the word day and night. That's an application. And that's to understand. And then it says essentially your house will be built on a solid foundation. Or like the trees, it'll be blown away.
It's the thing, you should take a very similar approach to masonry. Really, you should take a very similar approach to whatever hobby you have. And I'm just gonna say hobby. Yeah. I'm just gonna say hobby, but we all know that this is a profession of which. But if it is your profession, you should aspire to be good at it. Because nobody wants to go to their job and be bad at it. If you ever, well, hopefully you don't.
Most of us, you know, there's some exceptional people out there, bro.
Right. And so the thing that I think about is the fact that, like, I just had a performance review. We always have performance reviews in November. My boss was like, you did an exceptional job this year. And that made me feel good. You should be happy when you come and study masonry. This should be an enjoyable experience. You shouldn't feel overwhelmed. And if somebody's talking above your head, ask us to explain it. Because the true mark of an intelligent man is somebody who can talk to the CEO and the janitor.
Yep.
And hold a conversation with both.
But
if you can't, you know, and so this should be something that you should have a fervor to do. Now, I will say this, people burn you out real fast.
Yeah.
And if you ain't never been burnt out, I'm gonna tell you, just keep on being a Mason. You might not have been one long enough. They might not have voluntold you enough.
It's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen.
Depending on the jurisdiction, it's gonna happen. But yeah, you're right. You should be able to. My grandpa always said that, man. You should be able to have a conversation with a pimp and the CEO and everybody in between. And in doing that, you have to understand things at all levels. But you got to care and you got to have a why. You're a solid why, right? But I say that to say this. What's the first lesson in Masonry? What is the very first lesson you learn? Before you learn anything else in Masonry, start with an H. Humility. Humility. We stop being humble and we stop caring and we stop understanding that other people's feelings, and we stop being selfless. We start being selfish.
Man, you mean to tell me I gotta be nice?
You gotta be nice. You gotta be humble, right? That's the first lesson. We gave our left shoe as not a sign of humility, humiliation, but humility.
Can I
Right.
interject 2 seconds?
Please.
My father, I opened my own company. I was in FA Academy in Oklahoma Pass, started 23. So I was a watchdown well above my pay grade or above my age. And I came back home and I asked my father to join Masonry. And he said, boy, you ain't ready. Situations happen. The company he's working for shut down. He came to work for me and he's working with me for a few years. And every year I go to him and say, Pops, man, I want to be a Mason, man. He look at me and say, son, you're ready. 6 succession times, year after year, 6 years. And back then we were paying with cash because you'd fill the packets with cash. You pay the 30 staff, whatever. And I went to him for the 6th time and I said, Pops, what's going on, man? I gave him the money, blah, blah, blah. And now my father's working for me now. I'm not working for my father. My father's working for me. And he says, son, I knew it ready. I said, see, same, whatever, whatever. I walk out the door. And he said, no. That's the same, blah, blah, blah. And I went out in my truck and I sat down. That's when I realized that you're talking about humility. The humility, and I had to stop and realize that I had refused to humble myself. And before you could lead, you have to learn how to follow. And I heard that somewhere else, and I came back and said, I apologize to my father. He gave me an application. After I got accepted after 3 years into the #1 lodge in the Bahamas, I got a call by the worship master say, bro, you in. He sat me down, he lectured me. And I went to my father, they had a lunch bunch type scenario, and I went to him and he hugged me. I talked to him, he says, well, we sat down, we ate. And he sat there and he laughed and he smiled. And he says, what news you have for me? I said, Pops, I'm in. My father got up and hugged me and he cried for the 3rd time I've ever seen my father cry. My father was a past master over here. He was en route to get his 33rd degree the following year. He was already accepted. We found my father dead on the Tuesday. He died Friday, on the Sunday after I got accepted. What I'm saying to you is the older gentlemen in this room, understanding that their children are watching them. I saw a son come up to one of the brothers in here earlier. That's what life is supposed to be. If we don't show our children that this thing makes sense, they will never follow us. There's a Louis Jewell. I don't know how many of you guys, sons, fathers, grandfathers, grandsons, or asked the question. My junior asked the question at 17. Because his grandfather and his father were Masons, he was eligible at 18 because we don't let you in until 25, right? At least for the Premier Lodge. And I'm saying to you guys right now, we're sitting on your brothers. When you get up to go to lodge, if you take your time to prepare the night before, set out your suit, set out your shoes, set out your socks, set up whatever else you need to set out and allow your sons, in particular, to watch you get prepared for the day before. Don't just grab your stuff and say, hey, look, I got in the lodge tonight. They will remember that. That will put in their mind, this is so important to my father. It must be important to me. We look at the numbers. I just came back from one of the islands, Andres, and I did the AGM there. Big fight. We put some people down there from the capital to go to that particular island. And he built a lodge in 4 years. The lodge was defunct for 11 years. And they were there to kill him. And I went down to represent my grandmaster. And we had to balance that scenario. But nobody young from lineage was in that lodge. 2. The father was there, but the son wasn't there. Or the son wasn't there, the father was there. The only way we're able to build this is through our own household. If we're able to allow our children, our sons and our daughters to understand, because our daughters will marry Masons if we do it right. Yeah. If we're living right as Masons, our daughters will marry Masons. So therefore, our grandsons will be Masons. And I'm just putting to you, the whole group here, take the effort to allow them to see you preparing for that meeting. Laying out your suit, not your wife, putting out your suit or your shoes or whatever. You polishing your own shoes. On Sundays, my kids got, back and they had to polish my shoes to go to church. Saturday night, they sit down and they polish all the shoes. Allow them to see you preparing, and then you would see them asking you the question, Pops, Grandpa, what is this all about? What are we doing here? Because we know in all your jurisdictions, numbers dying. Allow us to be able to set the mark. And that's what I put to you before we sign off tonight. make a concerted effort for your children and your grandchildren, for those who are like me, right, to be able to see you preparing for Lodge and are not allowing any deviation. See, when you set out your Lodge stuff, you pick up your Bible and you read a scripture verse. Just to yourself, just allow them to see, to understand this is nothing to do with heathens, not heathens. This is from the heart and from that Bible, our book of sacred law. And I could leave that with you guys tonight. Because now I have 3 sons. And ironically, my junior, who's 10 years younger than my senior, got into masonry and his brothers followed him. Yeah, you hear this now. My junior, who was 10 years younger than his siblings, got into masonry, and now we have 3. 1 in Boston and 2 here in the Bahamas. I'm just saying to you guys, please, let's look good, fill in that gap, given the why, because you talked about the why, Dr. Randall. You talked about the why. And they're asking the question, why I gotta go through this? When I could go on whatever YouTube or whatever game or whatever the situation is, the why. And the why to me is the biggest question. And watching those guys last night, I sat there for the Grandmaster. I had my district deputy, and we were doing whatever needed to be done. And we came out there and our worship master was not lynched. Right? Because he was not of that island. And, you know, just like jurisdictions and counties and the rest, it's you know what I mean, it's clannish. So please, allow our children, our grandchildren to watch us prepare to go for masonry. And I guarantee you within 3 years, you can see a difference.
Wow. Brothers, I'm not even gonna say anything after that except for we're gonna end it there. I think if just like I told you, I apologize in advance for what you take away from this. And that right there was a summary. He just dropped the mic. So again, we will conclude next month, or we'll pick it back up again next month and end the series of Royal Select Masters, and then we'll get into Knights Templar. But thank you, Brother Cartwright, Fast Master Cartwright, for those duties.
That's past Grandmaster Cartwright, sir.
Yeah, past Grandmaster
Past Trice, past Excellent, past
illustrious sir.
KYCH, so
I'm just gonna call you illustrious sir. So I
just call me brother. Yes, say brother.
Nah, man, I appreciate it, Dale. Good to see you, brother. You got my number. Hit me up. Again, we're gonna continue the series, man, and I encourage you to get your brothers on here, so that we can all knowledge share together. And you see that it's more than just what we see in our rituals. We get nuggets like that, and you don't get nuggets like that just reading your ritual. So blessings to every family on here. I know Burley and I gotta go. We got about 12 minutes before we got to jump on another call. But we'll definitely see you brothers next month. I appreciate it. Again, Dale, you and the guys did a hell of a job in Maryland a couple of weeks ago. I appreciate the hospitality. Our Grand High Priest appreciated it and wanted me to pass on his sentiments. And you know what I mean, your Aunt Thrice, whether it was Ward, Martinez, Ward, Trey's on here. Again, much props to you guys, man. We'll see you guys and your brothers next month.
Thank you, sir.